Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the XForceGlobal channel. Thank you very much for joining. Hope you're all having a fantastic start of the week. Today, we're back with another Bitcoin analysis, and I'm here to make sure to update the price action from our prior analysis and see how we can go forward with the updated wave counts. Now, we did get an unexpected drop here. It would kind of caught us off guard for both the bulls and bears, but very rewarding for the bears on this move here. But is this move going to be compared to any of these moves and just going to be some kind of false move to the downside, and we're possibly working for another round of consolidation to the upside? Or are we working for a possibility, building the merits for going down to the downside and breaking these lows here, which we'll all be discussing in this video. Now, our first option here is the possible triangle here. Now, we still have to talk about what kind of corrective patterns we may be in. As you can tell by our thumbnail, we do have a few possible options here for still a possible move to the upside, just due to the fact that we haven't broken these lows here. Now, bears are probably still expecting these lows to be broken, which is something to still be considering even as a bull, because we are now trading quite low at this current time of recording. We did hit the 886 or the 88.6%, which is pretty much the last level of support for any bullish momentum continuation. But until these levels break, we still have to continue discussing the possible narrative of more continuation to the upside, however long it may be. It is pretty brutal. I know a lot of people are quite underwhelmed or still not too surprised by this move to the downside, but overall, I think people are still losing a lot of investor confidence after we had this drop, because we've had so many rounds of consolidation to the upside and a lot of fake outs. But with that being said, the Elliott wave patterns here presented do help us kind of narrow down the scenarios as much as we can, and at least we can know what has invalidated and what has validated. So what is currently on the table here? Well, we have our first option here as a possible continuation of our wave 4 here. Now, we originally anticipated having wave 4 end here, which is still likely the case, but we do have more corrective options here if we're going to be deeming this as a possible triangle, because we need 5 subwaves being created in the fashion of the A, B, C, D, E waves. Now, the triangles, they're very tricky because you don't want to be assuming them too early, especially if you only have the third subwave of the wave C. Usually, even with wave D end, you still really don't want to be assuming a triangle, because you do see a lot of failures in triangles, especially on the macro. But it is something to still consider due to the fact that when you zoom out, we've had a lot of sideways consolidations and we're still assuming that we're in a bull market. And the only sideways continuation that I can think of is the possible triangle idea, and we can fit it in this idea here. So with that being said, our first subwave A is being built as a possible ABC here. Now, this ABC, it does have its pros and cons. Now, this major con here is that the fact that we have to utilize this move here as a 5-wave move for our wave C. The second idea here is I've taken quite a time here, because this move here, although this is still looking like a 5-wave move going into a possible wave 1, the only way I can fit in a possible corrective move is utilizing this move as a possible wave A, B, C into a wave W, as a really extended wave W, and then we have a short wave X, and then a very short wave Y that completes our WXY to the upside for a possible wave B. Now, if we zoom out, this still does look quite corrective. Now, that's the reason why we have to still continue the idea that we may be working in corrections. So we have to continue that bias that we have to be trying to at least fit in what kind of corrective structures we can put in. So the use case study for this, now a lot of people don't use use case studies, especially with past price action, is that when we were trading for that first 1, 2, or possible A, B, or even possible WX wave, if we zoom back and we were seeing the first part of the bull run, we've seen our first initial kickoff waves, most notably being this wave 1, and then this wave A of this flat here, of this wave 1, 2. Now, this is pretty much, in hindsight, the only way we can count it as a possible sideways 1, 2. Now, if we're going to be able to do that and you zoom in further, our wave A was really extended, and then we had a wave B and then a very short wave C. So this use case study to me is kind of applicable to the current situation that we're in right now if we're seeing this as a possible sideways corrective move, because we also saw a sideways corrective move for this wave 1 too. So what that means is, since we have our first wave 1 being extended as well, and then we also have our internal structure as extended wave A, I think that if we're going to be still utilizing that, we're still in a bull market, we can also utilize this move here as a possible extended wave W, X, and Y as such, which also has that similar type of look to the upside as a 3-wave move rather than a 5-wave move. So if that's the case, we could still alternatively label our wave W here and have this as a possible flat. But to me, this seems like it's not an incomplete structure for a possible impulse wave. I think it's the beginning of an impulse wave of a larger bearish structure, which I'll go over in just a moment. So to me, in order to complete this, I think that we have to label this as a possible WXY and then this as a completed ABC. Because to me, this is an incomplete impulse move for the beginning of a possible wave 1 and a possible wave 2, and we may be working for a wave 3. So this scenario of the 1, 2, 3 will be applied differently. However, if we're still working correctively, this has to be near, or at least near complete of a structure of an ABC. Now, going back and trying to digress on how we can work this move out as a possible corrective structure, since we do have so many overlaps, is that now we have to kind of utilize how this range is working out, and this range is working out. So the first move is the initial kickoff stage, the consolidation phase, and then we have the resolution phase. So the first stage of the kickoff is that we have a possible leading expanding diagonal just due to the fact that we're now seeing so many overlaps within the structure. And then we finally got the resolution here, right? So we can start thinking about what kind of corrective overlap structures we can fit in here. And the only real way I can fit it in is a possible expanding leading diagonal. Now, these are quite rare, but again, we do have a possible ABC being created, again, with a leading contracting diagonal here. However, I don't like the fact that our wave B is too short. It's very, very short. However, it could work. But just due to the fact is that I like to utilize this range as a consolidation phase, and then we got the resolution after that. So really doesn't matter at this point anyways if you're still seeing this as an ABC. It's just kind of a way that we can see this a lot more easy, because the people or the markets don't see these types of correction patterns, especially new Elliotticians and a lot of people who are trading the markets in general don't see these types of patterns. They're seeing this as just one possible larger move to the downside. And again, like I've said, Bitcoin works in distribution phases, right? So we want to extend our distribution phases as much as we can, or the transitional phases. And this is how I can fit in a possible ABC, where wave A is going into a leading expanding diagonal. We have a consolidation phase that's now relatively fitting as a possible a B wave in time, and then this is the resolution phase that has now resolved itself for a really swift move to the downside. So for this triangle, in order to be validated, is that we should not go past the termination of our wave A, which is indicated by this red line here. We really do not want to break this move here. So what that means is we could still be working in a possible completion or the resolution phase depending on how far this wave C extends for this wave B. Now, if we're going to be continuing down, this might be turning into something else as we start to get closer to the invalidation level. But again, that's the most trickiest part when you're working with Elliott wave patterns, because you really could work with a lot of hybrid scenarios until they're really truly invalidated. However, with the current data given, I think that we're still working in a possible A, B, C, D, E. Now, it's far too early because we still need to have a resolution for our wave D subwave, and let alone we need another pullback for a possible wave E. Now, wave E can still have a little bit more of a leeway because it can be truncated. Wave E doesn't have to meet the trend line, but again, we still need at least the subwave D coming up and retesting this trend line here without breaking this wave B here. So this is kind of the first overall kind of scenario that I think that is a higher probable scenario in terms of the consolidation phase that we may be in, which makes our wave 4 consolidating longer. So I think that this wave 4 could be still working, but we do have a few more options where maybe we could be working in a possible diagonal to the upside, which means when you zoom out, we still have, again, there's pros and cons to this. Now, the major pro to this is that we do have a termination of a wave 4 because we originally anticipated that this was a completion, and we're still using that kind of scenario in that case where this is a completion of a wave 4. So if that's the completion of wave 4, what's next? Now, we could have a possible diagonal being made here, an ending diagonal, that is a contracting variation or expanding variation depending on how the market plays out. So if we're still utilizing this possible WXY to the upside, it's the possibility of a possible three-way move going into wave 1. It can't be an impulse here. It has to be forced as a WXY here. Now, a zigzag family is going to be assumed next as well for a wave 3 because we also have the completion of the same ABC structure here. Now, what's great about this is that we did meet pretty much the maximum level of the Fibonacci retracement of the previous preceding wave, which is the 88.6%. Now, we're going to be looking for another three-way move to the upside. So if recovery does happen, and we're getting the first steps of a possible recovery here, but we just don't know until we really get it. We're still looking for a possible 5-wave idea move of that first move here, and then a 2, 3, 4, 5 to the upside. Now, if this is the case, we're going to be looking for that first wave 1, or first wave A rather, a wave B, and then a wave C to the upside to kind of give us a first contracting look in terms of that wave 3. And then we ideally want to see that wave 4 coming back into the territory of wave 1. It doesn't have to. And then we want to go into the 5th wave of a subwave. And that'll still bring us not into only all-time highs, but give us clues that this whole move here has been corrective. And we're now going to be concluding the larger 5th wave. And that is exactly what I'm looking for in terms of what kind of pullback we can be looking for. And that is where I will be looking for shorts more specifically. Now, this move here, how it's going to be fitted on the larger time frame, does have a great look to it because it does have a resolution to everything in terms of not only the bull market, but also meeting just overall even numbers of where the price targets may be. So if that's the case, we're going to be utilizing this move here as a 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a 5. Now, this also fits into the idea that we may be working in the internal structure here. Instead of a flat here, we're still seeing this as a 1, 2, 3, 4 being ended here, and this is the extension of the wave 3. Instead of saying that this is a 1, 2, 3, possibly 4, and then 5, like that triangle idea that we had. So this idea is possibly the best looking scenario, but is still far too early, just like the triangle scenario. So this is something that I'm going to be monitoring without a doubt if we do get a move to the upside in a three-wave fashion. So everything, once we start moving up, if in the fact we do move up, and that's a big if, is if we do break this all-time high in a three-wave manner, I won't be seeing this as a flat that many might be seeing this as a flat because we do have a possibility of a flat being built here. Instead, it's going to be more of a contracting ending diagonal that we might be creating. And that is something that has been creating all the time since we have been creating all of these extreme moves to the upside. So this may be a possible ending to our conclusion of a bull market here, whether it's going into a wave 1, and then we might be working on a larger wave 2 or some sort. But this is the zone that nevertheless I'm going to be looking for a possible pullback, and that is where I'll be ultimately bearish when everyone is going to be turning bullish. So again, all these pullbacks here, they never looked good in hindsight, in real time, but in hindsight, it's just been a move to the downside. And until we start breaking major invalidations, then that's when we can start thinking about, even no matter how late it may be, is the bearish options. So it's all about opportunity cost here, ladies and gentlemen. Do you really want to be taking a short here, or do you want to be taking profits? And that's something that you have to ask yourself as a trader. So in my opinion, I think this ending diagonal has a fairly strong look to it, and then we can finally finish our wave 5 here in the primary degree. So that's the second option. Now we do have the option of the possible 1-2 idea still. Now this 1-2 idea is still a little bit far-fetched. I think that the pros and cons to this does have its merits and cons to this, because the depth of this 1-2 has pretty much been met at the maximum capacity of that 88.6% that I mentioned. But this move here, these wild swings, just makes me believe that this doesn't seem likely as a 1-2, although we did meet all of our expected targets. I think that we may be working, it's just better to fit in that idea or assumed idea that we may be working in a consolidation and move to the upside. And if we do move to the upside for this possible wave 3, absolutely possible, we can always shift to this idea if it moves more impulsively instead of a 3-wave move where we might be creating that contracting look. Now, going back to the diagonal idea one more time, we could label this here as our ABC and have our diagonal wave start here for the trend line. But again, we can't fit in a flat idea for the wave 2, or we really want to be working in especially in an ending diagonal, in series of 3s of zigzag families. But I don't want to sit here and be too subjective. It is a theory after all. I do think that, for me personally, I accept having different types of patterns, especially more complex patterns within diagonals, as long as they fit on the large time frames. I did go over this with Elliott Wave International as well, especially when we were talking about this flat here, because I was one of the first to actually bring this up, where we were working in a possible ABC and we had an expanded flat within a wave B. Why is this being accepted for a wave X when it can't be accepted for a wave B? And that's something that I did bring up on the Elliott Wave International, and it's something that is still under review. So with this being said, for this wave 1-2, I think it's just more of the same idea as that diagonal idea, because it is still that hybrid idea that this is ending of something, and we are working in that very important zone of a possible pivotal zone of a retracement. We're looking for the first steps of wave 1-2, and the only difference between that diagonal scenario, because we're working for a possible 3-way move up, is that we're going to be looking for a wave 3 rather, and that'll bring us to higher targets for a bullish continuation. So this is ultimately the most bullish scenario, saying that we are completed with the wave 1-2 here. So again, does have its pros and cons. The pros, again, we do have a completion here for a larger wave 3, 4 degree, and then we do have that utilization of that 5-way move into a wave 1, which I do like, and that's kind of the original expectation that I had. So, but again, the con to this is that we're working so wildly in a range right now that I think that this idea is a little bit off in terms of its look and overall extension in time. So that brings me on to the possible questionable combo idea. This idea still is out of the question for me. I'm still not sure why people are bringing this back up, but this idea, whether you want to label wave X here, wave X here as the expanded flat, doesn't seem likely at this point. I guess we can even start working in a possible triangle idea if this wave 3-wave move starts working as such. But again, I don't think that this is likely the case, because I think that there's no in-betweens at this point, meaning that there's evidence behind this, meaning that we haven't seen a WXY combo pattern playing out on Bitcoin whatsoever. So for those who are trying to be creative, fantastic. You can be creative as much as you want, but is it likely? Most likely not. So for me, the termination of wave W here, especially when you have this type of orthodox bottom or top, whatever you want to label this as a W or not, whether you want to label wave W here, this is a problem. We have too many price extremes at the lower region of the bottom of the range, where we don't really have any price extremes within the top here. We're just constantly being rejected within this region here. So that's a problem in itself in me. And the wave Y, again, we've talked about the exhaustion patterns. We've exhausted pretty much the flat. I don't like to see this as a flat, even though we did meet the maximum 2.618. That's the least common target of an extended wave C anyways. So to me, this just doesn't seem like a flat idea to me. Again, we could be working that possible triangle idea as a last resort for a possible wave W or for a wave Y. But At this point, you might as well be bearish if you think that we're going to be breaking these bottoms. So that leads me to the next kind of option, which is the bearish option. Because like I've said, this still seems like not a finished or resolved impulsive wave. Now we can start utilizing the contracting variation of a diagonal if we're going to be assuming a possible larger move in anticipation to the downside. So what this means is, whether you're in a wave 3 or 4, or a 1, 2, doesn't really matter, is that we could finally start thinking that this may be working in a larger move to the downside, and we may be working in a larger wave C now, because we do have the necessary first steps of an impulse if the selling pressure continues, which means that this is leading us into a wave 1. Now we can say that this is a wave 2, and if we start extending highly into the possible wave 3, we really want this wave 3 to be extended as much as possible, breaking these lows ideally, have an ideal bounce for a wave 4 that's also short in time to be comparable to this wave 1, 2, and then a final fifth wave to complete for that wave C. That, in my opinion, could be a partner leg for this possible leading diagonal going to wave A. Now, there's pros and cons to this as well, because I don't like to see this as a leading diagonal going into wave A. Just doesn't seem likely. But when you zoom out, having this as a possible A, B, C to the downside fits a little bit better to me. It does have that merit of that possible larger corrective move to the downside, meeting us at the area of interest and liquidity zone that could bring us further down if this last leg of a partner leg is finally the kind of resolution that we may be looking for a possible wave C. So to me, I think that is most likely the case. Now, we are not labeling this as a flat. We are labeling this as just an idealized ABC, because we didn't meet the 90% of that level for a possible flat. So to me, this is an ABC that we could be looking for this level of area of interest and liquidity to be taken out if this is going to be a further continuation to the downside. So that's going to be continuing based on the daily. We could be really looking for a further downside, and I think that we will eventually break these lows. And again, I don't think that WXY scenario is going to be fitting, and it just, how we haven't seen that whatsoever on the macro perspective, ladies and gentlemen, it just doesn't fit in. So we should still be removing that idea and not being too creative in terms of that. I think it's either we break lower or we start working higher, and then we start attacking these higher levels here at the all-time highs, or we consolidate a longer and work with a more simple pattern, although it's a little bit less likely. So that idea is kind of the case for the bearish option, the first bearish option. Now there is a far more bearish idea, and it works on the idea of a possible truncation here, because we are utilizing everything that we have talked about in terms of the internal structures. Instead of this being a wave, a transitional wave, this is the end of something completely, of a larger move, meaning that this primary 3, 4, and then primary wave 5 is now complete entirely, meaning that this move here was a failure or a truncation, quote unquote, because you need 5 waves up for a possible wave 5 before it can truncate. So we have all the necessary expectations met. From a fundamental psychological perspective, even from the bearish perspective, many people were expecting at least one more high, including me. So if that is a failure of an expectation, to me, as a collective thought of interest, with this being the move that has caught us off guard, with being a very sharp move to the downside, this also could be a possible truncated fifth, meaning that this wave 3, 4, 5 is now complete in its entirety. So we're now utilizing, again, this move as the completed 3-4 that we had originally anticipated, that had the best look, and this had the best look of that internal hybrid structure of that 5-wave move to the upside, and that has completed our wave 5 of a 5 of a possible 3, or a possible 5 of a wave 2 of some sort, or wave 1 of some sort. But we won't know until we start moving to the downside, because that'll create our first actionary wave of that wave 1 or wave A, and then a three-way move up to a 2 or a B, and then we'll start to determine whether this level is going to be the major interest or not, because that is a level that we haven't retested ever since we had this move up here. So that, to me, in my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, is all the cases that we can talk about. We have a larger possible truncated fifth being here as a far more bearish option. And in reverse, we have a possible ABC structure being here that'll help create an overall channel, in my opinion. And then our first area of interest and liquidity will be in this zone here. And then we have a questionable combo idea, which is out of the picture, in my opinion. And then we have the possible 1-2 idea, which is still not looking like the best idea, but when you do zoom out, it is a possibility where we can have that 3, 4, 5. Or a diagonal idea, which is now starting to look going to have the best look if it does play out, but it's far too early, and that's the con in itself. And then we have the triangle variation, which also is questionable because it's usually not the highest probable case. But the biggest pro to this is that this is utilizing its maximum efficacy of these wild ranges, meaning that this move down, this move up, this move down is all part of the motive correction of a possible sideways correction of a triangle. Now, we could fit in that possible idea of a flat being created here, but again, I'd rather have a resolution to something than not. So hopefully that was helpful, ladies and gentlemen. We are still in an area of interest since we did hit that 88.6%. Are we going to be working for a three-way move up? That's going to be determined in the possible next month or so, in my opinion, because, or at least the first leg should be created within next week or so. I'll be continuing to update the micro time frame counts. This is more of the more reorganized scenarios to help you guys build your own thesis. So, yep, thank you very much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.